So here's the story from start to finish of how we turned a meme into an actual game, starting from the very beginning, the inspiration. I grew up playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on the Xbox original, and I used to play this game with my mom because it wasn't that violent, and it was actually the only sport game I really got into. I was a huge fan. I loved collecting the secret unlocks, and I loved the music as well. It was later on in college when I discovered Tony Hawk's Pro Dater, which actually has been a huge inspiration on the sort of indie games that I've been making since then. It has a very different feel than the original Pro Skater, and if you haven't checked it out, you definitely should. Links in the description. So those were two of the Tony Hawk influences, I would say, within the medium. Of course, Tony Hawk himself is an inspiration without any video games needed. I recently started skateboarding. I was skating probably for the last 3 months before I injured my leg pretty bad. I actually broke my ankle in addition to spraining my ankle in the same moment. And close your eyes if you don't want to see this, but here's what my ankle looked like. So significant swelling, and then here's my doctor explaining just how screwed up I was. Fortunately, I did make a recovery. I haven't been able to run since then, so I tried going for a run recently, and I did get sort of like a re-injury, so I'm kind of stationary these days, and I hurt my other leg in high school, and now that injury has flared up, so I'm having a lot of trouble with the legs, but that's okay, because what's wonderful about game development is you can do it sitting in your chair. Speaking of which, I was sitting on my butt when I found this post on Twitter, or a post like it. It was a few years ago, so this is probably not the exact one, but it had to do with Tony Hawk being recognized as a video game character or something to that effect. And the first comment, as always, was this ridiculous meme, Tony Hawk's Existential Nightmare. And so I was just instantly fascinated by the idea of this fictitious video game that all these people were referencing, and I immediately knew that I would love to try and bring it to life and make it into an actual game. However, this idea was really just an inkling, and it would stay sort of in the back of my mind for about 2 years. I have a video game ideas Google Doc that I've been adding to slowly over the years. It's over 10 pages now, and the Tony Hawk musical game looks around the 2 years ago mark. Now, most of these ideas are complete crap, but every now and then when I want to make a random game or draw some inspiration from somewhere, I go to this ideas doc and I find, one or two mechanics that I think might be interesting. It was recently that I found myself in this doc when Scott and I, my business partner, were talking about what our next game would be. You see, we had an idea for a big game, but a bit of an argument with respect to what direction we might take with it, and we thought it might be a good idea to cool off and return to an idea from the past. Scott actually suggested the idea for Tony Hawk's Existential Nightmare, and it was at that point we began working on a script. Now, when I say that we began working on the script, what I really mean is Scott began working on the script. I had only provided him with a rough draft of kind of the key points I wanted to hit. So that roughed original script looked like this. There's this pro skater named Tony Hawk. He wants to be the best, and so he traded his soul to the devil in order to do the 900. In Japan, at this big competition, he gets very injured and goes into a coma. At that point, he never wakes up, and the game continues nonetheless. So when he does wake up, it's not that he actually woke up, it's that he's like a ghost because he's died. And Rodney Mullen, his best friend, is still able to communicate with him, but now Tony Hawk is not really getting remembered, and when he talks to people, he could talk to them as this ghost, but the real Tony Hawk has actually died. And then there's this idea of this constant game that's being played, where you are skateboarding, and the idea is that this minigame at the end, you can't lose. And in fact, you want to lose because you want to die as Tony, but you're never able to do that because, and we had this line in there from the beginning, legends never die. Also, since it was set in Japan, I really wanted to tie in a influential moment where he's going to be talking with Yuto Horigome, who, as you may know, is my favorite skateboarder.
What are you going to do with this thing?
Yeah, so happy.
However, that completely got cut. Much for the betterment of the project, Scott went in a slightly different direction. It was at this point that we split up and we both independently researched the life and achievements of the true Tony Hawk. Then we came together and compared both of our timelines, finding what interesting moments from this guy's life we thought we could incorporate into the story. Then, it was at that point we split up again, now for me to figure out the artistic direction of the project, and for Scott to start writing down the first draft of our script. I decided on having two different modes for the game. The first would be a Dance Dance Revolution mode, where we would have that on the left-hand side of the screen, while on the right you would see Tony skating, and then if you did well in the Dance Dance Revolution, he would do tricks inside the game, which never actually happens, because we didn't get to that. The second version was going to be an open-world 3D environment similar to a Yakuza 0 or Grand Theft Auto, where you could go around and chat with NPCs. However, this was pretty much completely cut and replaced with cutscenes, which were much more railroady, but got the project done much faster. We originally planned for it to be just a weekend project, however, we soon realized that we bit off a lot more than we could chew in just one weekend. The project slowly grew to be about a 7-day project, where Scott was working on the project after his day job, and I was working throughout the entire day for 15-hour days. So in total, the project was a few hundred hours of work, probably not more than 300 hours, but we definitely got a lot done in a short amount of time. As I was working on the artistic direction, Scott was working on the script. That included the writing of a huge Google Doc, which is now over 30 pages, and includes all of the scenes as well as all of the songs. So the scenes remained pretty much unaltered, but the songs changed a lot, and were actually the focus of probably one of the biggest arguments in our development process. You see, Scott was pretty stubborn on this idea of writing songs without any music backing them during the development process. He was really focused on the work being as original as possible, maybe to the extent of writing original music as well, which is something we explored but ultimately didn't have time for. And he worried that if a song had existing lyrics, then our song would sound like a parody, and that would devalue the work. On the other hand, I felt like we didn't have the musical capabilities to write a song from scratch, or the rhythms and melodies or music from scratch, and so I felt like it would be better use of our time if we worked on an existing song. I tried to convince Scott that this would be the best way to go. However, I ultimately failed to do so, and I paid for it later when I had to spend hours toiling over how to rework the lyrics in order to fit melodies for royalty-free music that we eventually chose. After Scott and I finished our respective tasks, we teamed up again and compared notes. As Scott worked on significant rewrites for different parts of the scenes as well as the songs, I started working on hunting down 3D assets that we could use for our game. I found assets from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 online, including this 3D model of Tony Hawk, which was awesome because it was so realistic, but also a little bit scary because he just looked so lifeless and frozen. However, we ultimately didn't decide to use this because I just couldn't find environment assets that could fit this aesthetic. Instead, I found this really awesome pack on the Unity Asset Store for only $50, which included a giant environment where a lot of the props were already set up. So for example, this is the house that we used for Tony's house, and this is the city outside. So everything was more or less all ready for us to go, and I took this demo scene and more or less just copied it for our project. However, I really didn't like the character designs of the different people in this world, and so I bought a separate pack for the characters. And so this pack is called the Civil Characters, and it allows for you to customize what the characters are going to look like. And so it was through this custom character editor that I created the full cast for our game, including the mom, young Tony, old Tony, the devil, etc. The devil's 3D model face was actually Frankensteined onto one of these characters. I think I took the businessman in the back there because this low poly pack did not come with a devil mask. I found the 3D model for the devil as a bust on free3d.com. However, I didn't need a bust of the devil, I just needed the devil's head. So then I used the free modeling program called Blender in order to remove the shoulders from the bust and just get the head of the devil. As Scott was finishing the script, I faced an important decision in figuring out what work he would be put on next. Basically, game designers as a position, it's one of the most adaptable positions in the entire industry. A game designer could be someone who's working in spreadsheets through their entire day, or it could be someone who's writing dialogue, or it could be someone who's designing character interactions, or just doing math all day, right? A game designer could be so many different things. And so I had to figure out what was going to be the sort of least technical work that Scott could take on that would still help the project. And it was at that point I realized we had sort of these main pillars of work that was going to need to happen. The first was there was a significant amount of voice acting that needed to happen for the game. So Scott could have been cast for Tony or young Tony or all the characters, and that could have been a whole chunk of work in itself. Also, we had significant animation work that needed to happen in the game, and so Scott could have worked on that instead. Ultimately, I chose for Scott to work on the animations, and I created a system that would allow him to do that without having to know too many technical abilities. That included use of this Unity asset called DreamTech Splines. Splines are a way that you could do animations in a game engine, and they're actually really common in the video game industry. However, Unity does not have a solution for spline work that's provided with the default editor, which frankly kind of sucks because they're a really important part of game development. So there's a number of third-party splines, and we use DreamTech as I showed you. And so basically you could see them in the scene here. These are all the different splines. So these sort of like twisty lines are the splines. And basically they map out where the character is going to go from one moment to the next. So this spline is not very interesting, but it's the path of the hawk at the end of one of the songs. And it basically just has two nodes that determine, where the hawk is going to travel from which point to which point. And you can add additional nodes to make the, hawk go in twisty turns and stuff like this, right? A significant portion of the project was just placing these splines around the 3D game world and syncing them up to the music or dialogue, depending on what needed to happen. I created all the splines for our cutscenes, and once Scott finished his work on the script, he did all of the splines for the songs. Once Scott finished with the script, I was then in charge of most of the voice recording, including young Tony and young Rodney, which was performed by my younger brother, Michael.
Something skating is lame, but I think they're all the same. Matter your skating style. Tony does vert.
The process for making the songs included Scott choosing which songs we wanted, and then I changed the lyrics in order to match that song, and then I recorded myself singing on top of that song, which took many tries, and I had to cut parts out and re-record, and this Frankenstein version of many different takes is what eventually Michael would listen to on the headphones as he recorded his version of the lyrics. He recorded several different versions where he would fix issues and stuff, and then on the editing stage, I would compile his different versions and try to find the best version of the song as a union of all of his best sections. And then I did the same process for my own songs. And so that was pretty labor intensive and probably wasn't as much fun as it was recording the dialogue with Michael, because we were cracking up so much, just absolutely bawling with laughter at all of his Rodney voices because we just found them so funny.
I love you, man, but I don't want to see you get hurt. What?
Why did you stop?
I don't know. Alright, 3, 2, 1. Just go straight down. Let's go.
Alright, let's go.
I love you, man, but I don't. I love you, man, but I don't want to see you get hurt trying this crazy move. The 900 is really
That's great. I'm sorry, I missed you.
Look at that armor or something. You're gonna shatter your pelvis.
One place where non-technical people encounter a lot of difficulty in the game development process is version control, particularly with respect to binary files. So I usually handle almost all of that for Scott. And so what that looked like for this project was me remote controlling his computer using TeamViewer, having the scene changes that he did all apply to prefabs, committing those, and then dragging in those prefabs into a scene that I was locally controlling on my computer. We found that TeamViewer was the best way to do remote control for the computers, and then whenever we needed to review work, we would use Google Hangouts while talking to each other over a phone call. And so it was at this point in the project we needed to do a lot of review, basically, and we were just playing the game together, figuring out which parts worked and which parts didn't.
You want to achieve your dream?
So we're keeping the mountain venture?
Kid. It's never as
I wish there was something.
some
Oh my god! What the fuck? Dude, that is scary.
Now, wake up.
That is like some Mount Rushmore out of hell.
Hey, man.
Holy
Long
cow.
time no
Hey.
It's pretty cool, right?
Okay.
Yeah, no,
My
that's
name's
cool.
Tom.
That's
Rodney,
cool. It's
if
fucking
you
scary.
know it's
though.
true.
Here's what I want, though. This is why I think it would be really cool to have the demon at the end, because that's really creepy now. 'Cause
Right.
It's like,
Okay, now it's creepy. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think he should pop in like a second late or something?
what do you think? I don't think.
No, I don't think so. I think if he's just there. Okay, alright, we'll do a delay on the demon. And then when Tony says, no, don't do it, it wasn't worth it, should I have to click to get through that?
I think it should be the screen goes static or something like that.
As Scott finished the splines for the game, I had a playtest with Michael where we began to encounter bugs.
Damn it.
What happened?
It's broken.
Thankfully, most of the bugs didn't prove too difficult to fix, and we were able to get the version up and running. It was also at this point that I realized the fastest version of the program, where it has all the optimizations, significantly changed the clothes of some of the characters. So, for example, Tony's shoes and the mom's shirt become orange, and for some reason the dad's pants, which on the left-hand side are normally blue, turn into a bright green. At around this stage in the project, we both reflected on the experience so far. I wrote my reflection in the About section under Reflection, and you could read it there if you're interested. And then Scott spoke his over voice recording, and it got slightly cut off, but it starts something like, he said, during the development process, there are these weird moments when.
Very weird moment that you didn't even anticipate, and it ends up being better than, anything you could have written. And there are moments of flow where you're just like, where the hours just kind of go by, and then you're like, whoa, what the heck just happened? And then, yeah, man, there's been so much laughing. I don't think people acknowledge, that laughing during the day, some people don't do that at all throughout a day, and, to some degree, I feel like I'm taking up the universe's supply. But the fortunate thing about happiness and laughter is I do feel like it is almost like an endless well, but you just need to know how to get to it, and pull stuff out of it. Anyway, that's kind of my reflections summed up. It's like a microcosm of all our other games in 1 week.
The game was finished on Easter Sunday, and during our Easter dinner, I presented it to my family, and there was a lot of laughs and good times as they enjoyed this thing that I had worked very hard on over the week.
Anthony, I told you, no skateboarding. You got no respect for the rules. You got no respect
Is that
for the
Scott?
rules.
Yeah.
It's never as easy as some.
Surprise!
Looks like the Joker.
What is up with the voice?
Wow. Scott made Did he just die? He's happy. Oh my.
Anthony, are you okay?
My family enjoyed the game. There was definitely a lot of laughs. And then after we finished the game, we actually watched old footage of Tony actually the real Tony completing the first 900 at the X Games.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, look at this! Tony Hawk, everybody!
It was just as spectacular as I'm sure it was if you were there in person in 99. So if you are thinking about making a game, you should definitely do it. And I would say probably one of the best parts about making this game is working with Scott. Me and him gel just so well together. It was an absolute pleasure to work with him again on a team. And so if there's a friend who you could get together with, make a little game, let this story inspire you to go out there and make something happen, because it really is rewarding and it's a whole lot of fun.